Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear participants, welcome to this session of our Islam Study Circle. We will begin with our usual sequence. First, we shall study the Quranic verse, and then we'll study a Hadith, and of course, then we'll go on to study a Bible verse. As far as the Quranic verse is concerned, the one I have selected is from Surah Mulk. It's verse number 2. The surah is Surah 67. So the words are الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْغَفُورُ. He who created death and life, that he may test you as to which of you is best regarding deeds, and he is also mighty and forgiving. And a very similar verse, this time from Surah Anbiya, verse 35, it says, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً وَإِلَيْنَا تُرْجَعُونَ. And we inflict you with sorrow and joy to test you, and to us shall you return. So, dear viewers, you can see that these two verses have a very fundamental guidance to provide us. All of us who live in this world, there are so many thousands and millions and billions of people who have come in this world, they have gone, and there has not been a single exception to the fact that people, when they go through their lives, they pass through various circumstances. These circumstances, of course, bring them happiness and they bring them sorrow. They bring them joy and they bring them grief at the same time. And there are periods of times in which grief at times is really prolonged. And then there are instances in which you have happiness and joy for a long time. But this goes on in our life. It's like a cycle, it's like a circle in which we are moving. And it is here that the Quran has given us this fundamental guidance that these circumstances of happiness and joy and this whole system of life and death has been created to test us. So the first verse actually tells us that the purpose of testing us is the real purpose before God when He created us. He wants us to go through a certain form of trial and then earn ourselves however much we behave, the way we behave as a result of that trial, earn that reward or some punishment as a result of our behavior in that trial. So this trial is something which is all pervasive. It's found in every single part of our lives, and whether we are happy or whether we are sad, whether we are going through good circumstances or bad ones, all these are forms of trials and they have to be considered as trials. Remember, if we are happy, we have to be graceful, we have to be thankful to the Almighty, and always regard Him to be someone who has actually provided us with this happiness. And when we are sad, when we are passing through trying times, when we are passing through testing times, we have to show steadfastness. We have to be patient and still thank God for whatever He has blessed us with and show this patience, because it is precisely this that we are being tested with. So it's like when we say when the going gets tough, the tough get going. The tough have to get going, because when circumstances are adverse, when the winds are adverse, and we are traversing rough seas, we have to guide our ship out of those rough seas and out of that whirlpool ourselves by that grit, by that determination, because it is here that we are being tested. And remember, the trial of grief and sorrow at times is easier than the trial of happiness, because you see, one tends to forget the Almighty when one is happy and in good circumstances. But when one is passing through straitened circumstances, he or she remembers God much more, and we have that strong God connection available as a result. So it's people who are passing through these bad circumstances often think that the trial of those people who are passing through happy circumstances is much easier. On the contrary, it might not be as it looks on its face. As I said, happiness tends to make us forget the Almighty. Joy, comfort, peace, luxury, these are things which have their potent effect on us, and we tend to forget our Creator. On the other hand, of course, this trial is something, the trial of sadness, the trial of sorrow, the trial of grief, calamity is being struck, and there are so many people about whom we can clearly say that troubles don't come singly to them, they come in multiple forms, and they come successively, and they are in fact put to such a lot of bother that it really makes us wonder at times that why is the Almighty trying people so hard. For example, when we see people who are handicapped, who are born blind, or maybe who are burnt because of certain incidents, and they are passing through such miserable circumstances that our heart rents when we see such people. The question does arise in our mind that what exactly God has in his mind when he makes people pass through such grief and such misery. So the answer is here in the verse that it's basically a form of trial, and how steadfast we are in that trial, because the compensation is going to be commensurate with the extent of the trial. The harder the trial, the more the compensation. It's just a question of showing patience in that. And remember, the Quran says at one place, وَجَزَاهُمْ بِمَا صَبَرُوا جَنَّةً وَحَرِيرًا. In Surah Dahr it says that basically the hereafter, paradise in the hereafter, is the reward of showing patience in this world. It's the reward of showing patience on adverse currents, on the sorrows that we pass through, and still being patient and still being thankful and still counting our blessings, because however much we may be bothered, however much we might be struck with calamities, we still have a lot to thank God of. I can tell you, and of course I'm sure you would share this with me, that however much we might be through spots of bother, but still if we keep counting our blessings, they might still be so much, would have so much to offer that we would perhaps still be drenched by the favors of the Almighty, and as a result show gratitude to him. And the important thing that we need to realize is that trials, of course, make us very strong. Especially if these trials are ones which inflict misery on us, or inflict straitened circumstances, like for example the trial of finances, when we are afflicted with some calamity, maybe the loss of a dear one, maybe a lot of things through which we are tried. But each time we come out of that trial, we feel more invigorated, we feel stronger, we feel that God connection because we are being provided with the opportunity to come closer to God. And if we are able to come closer to God, then of course this trial is something of a benefit. It's a blessing in disguise, as they say, and we have to realize that this blessing in disguise is something that we can really take benefit from. And also we need to realize that once we pass through trials, once we pass through these straitened circumstances, the extent of certain potentials that lie dormant in us, they come to the surface. There are a lot of qualities in a human being which do not come to the surface in normal circumstances. They stay dormant because their threshold is much less than the normal circumstance, the normal abilities that we have. When we pass through those circumstances, we find that patience and grit and courage and something that was hidden in us comes out as if we never knew that we had it. So at times these trials awaken these dormant potentials and bless us with certain attributes and qualities which were already there in us, but which we never knew that they existed within us. So these trials also bring out a lot of things that are hidden in our own selves. Human being is like a universe in itself. A human being is something so vast that we simply cannot gauge this vastness. And however, these trials and tribulations make us stronger, they make us discover ourselves, and they have many benefits if we have this positive attitude in facing them. Instead of showing discontent, instead of being disenchanted, we have to show this tremendous patience. And let's brace ourselves that life is perhaps a trial. It's indeed a trial, in fact a trial, and we have to pass this trial. And remember that we have to take life as a challenge. Let's never bog down. Let's always have that positive attitude. Let's always try to spot that silver lining behind those dark clouds, because life is all about positivity. Life is all about thinking best out of worse circumstances, thinking what best can be done in worse circumstances. So with these words, viewers, let's move on to the next part of our study session, and this is the hadith of the day. This hadith has been taken from the Al-Jami or Sahih of Imam Muslim. It's a beautiful narrative from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let me just read it out to you first, and then, of course, I'll just translate it. It says, "An Abi Hurairah anna Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال ينزل ربنا تبارك وتعالى كل ليلة إلى السماء الدنيا حين يبقى ثلث الليل الآخر فيقول من يدعوني فأستجيب له ومن يسألني فأعطيه ومن يسألني فأعطيه ومن يستغفرني فأغفر له." Abu Hurairah reported that God's messenger said, "The Almighty descends on the lower sky every night when the last 1/3 part of it remains, and says, 'Who is there to invoke me so that I may answer his invocations? Who is there to ask me so that I may give to him? Who is there to seek forgiveness from me so that I may forgive him?'" So this, of course, is a mention of what the Quran has already told us, that the biggest and the greatest reward-bearing prayer after the obligatory ones is the night prayer, which we call the Tahajjud prayer. It is the prayer in which the Almighty has a special eye of favor towards those who offer it. And when this hadith says that the Almighty descends to the lower sky every night, of course, it's not to be taken literally. It only means that when a person descends on the lower sky every night, when the Almighty descends to the lower sky, he actually is more attentive. He is looking for people who are awake at this time of the night, which is the time when we would like to sleep the most. And it is here that the Almighty wants us to struggle against our sleep, to fight this sleep, and to get up and make prostration before Him, to plead before Him, talk to Him, express our grief before Him, express our happiness before Him. And as we know from the Quran that this is a blessed time, and the most blessed of times is today available to all of us, because in this blessed month of Ramadan, all of us are able to get up before Sehri and right at the crack of dawn. Before that, when the time of Fajr is yet to begin, it's the time of the Tahajjud is before the time of Fajr. It's the same time in which the time of Sehri ends. So before that, we have about some time. And if we are able to spare moments in this time to prostrate before the Almighty, to talk to Him, to pray Tahajjud before Him, look what this hadith tells us, that the Almighty actually says that, "Who is there to pray to me, to invoke me, to make dua to me, so that I could answer him? And who is there who would like to express any of his or her needs that he or she might have, so that the Almighty would like to grant those needs to that person?" And then it goes on to say that, "Who is there who wants to ask forgiveness from me so that I can grant forgiveness to that person?" So it's like the Almighty, overwhelmed and expressing His tremendous affection for His creatures, has this bonus period, bonus time available to us. He has made this bonus time available to us every single day. Remember, the time of the Tahajjud, the time of this night prayer, comes every single day. And because we are passing through this blessed month of Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan, this Tahajjud prayer is available to us. It's available to us. This time is available to us in which we can simply get up and talk to Him and express our gratitude to Him, ask for forgiveness from Him, as this hadith says, and ask for other needs that we might be having. So people ask that what is the most blessed time to ask God, to pray to God, to make dua to Him? It is here that we are answered. And this hadith is actually in line with what the Quran has already said, that this night prayer has a lot of blessedness that it carries for us, because it makes us struggle to get up. It's not easy to get up at this time. Imagine yourselves in parts of the year when we don't have Ramadan. This 3 a.m. time or this 4 a.m. time early in the morning is normally the time when we are really deep into our sleep. I'm not talking about our youngsters, because for them it's still daylight at 3 or 4 a.m. maybe today. But for people who sleep, like for example at 12 at night or maybe around that time, getting up at 3 a.m. Is not that easy. But then, as we know, that the more difficult it is, the more rewarding it is as well. So the Almighty has given us this opportunity that as far as we can, if we can get up at this time, if we can pray to Him, if we can express our inner selves before Him, this is the best time. Remember, the biggest thing that we can really achieve in this life is spiritual fulfillment, is this self-satisfaction. And people who are prone to the Tahajjud prayer, they do tell us that maybe the troubles don't go away and maybe the bothers still stay. But if we become regular in our Tahajjud prayer, or even if we offer it occasionally, we find that peace of mind. We find that spiritual satisfaction settling in our hearts. We find that troubles might not bother us as much as they would have bothered us earlier on. So this is something really that we can do, and it's practicable. If not in Ramadan, it's of course practical almost every day, but in other parts of the year, let's make an effort to get up at least once a week maybe, or even once or twice a month, in which we plan to get up early, and we are able to talk to God, we are able to speak out our heart to Him. We have this heart-to-heart conversation with Him. And I do have this feedback from so many people that it really makes us spiritually elevated, spiritually advanced, and also we have that mental satisfaction that eludes us so much in today's world. Okay, let's now move on to the third part of our study circle. It's the Bible verse of the day. And I have taken some verses from the book of Proverbs, which is a book attributed to Solomon. It's chapter number 2, verses 1 to 22. And I have actually labeled it as moral benefits of wisdom. My son, if you'll take my words to your heart, storing up my laws in your mind, so that your ear gives attention to wisdom and your heart is turned to knowledge. Truly, if you are crying out for good sense and your request is for knowledge, if you are looking for her as for silver and searching for her as for stored up wealth, then the fear of the Lord will be clear to you, and knowledge of God will be yours. For the Lord gives wisdom, out of His mouth come knowledge and reason. He has salvation stored up for the upright. He is a breastplate to those in whom there is no evil. He keeps watch on the ways which are right, and takes care of those who have fear of Him. Then you will have knowledge of righteousness and right acting and upright behavior, even of every good way. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasing to your soul. Wise purposes will be watching over you, and knowledge will keep you, giving you salvation from the evil man, from those whose words are false, who give up the way of righteousness to go by dark roads, who take pleasure in wrongdoing and have joy in the evil designs of the sinner, whose ways are not straight and whose footsteps are turned to evil. To take you out of the power of the strange woman who says smooth words with her tongue, who is false to the husband of her early years, and does not keep the agreement of her God in mind. For her house is on the way down to death, her footsteps go down to the shades. Those who go to her do not come back again. Their feet do not keep in the ways of life, so that you may go in the way of good men and keep in the footsteps of the upright. For the upright will be living in the land, and the good will have it for their heritage. But sinners will be cut off from the land, and those whose acts are false will be uprooted. So this is basically a sermon on wisdom, which you have just heard from. It's ascribed to the Prophet Solomon, who was of course the son of David, King Daud, who is mentioned by the name as Dawood in the Qur'an. And as these words clearly sound, such warnings to us, and it tells us that basically it's the fear of God which makes us wise. It's the fear of God which makes us bold and courageous to show that wisdom. And it tells us that wisdom actually comes from the mouth of God. And the basis of wisdom is reasoning and knowledge. So The details which are then mentioned in the later paragraphs tells us that wisdom will come into your heart and knowledge will be pleasing to your soul. That the fodder of human soul is this wisdom which is extracted from divine revelation. So we have this fodder that quenches our thirst, that satiates our soul, which comes from God Himself, and which actually tells us that righteousness and the way to light and radiance is the path which leads to the Almighty, and the way to sin is the path of the wisest people, of the fools, of people who are not prudent enough to realize that when they adopt the path of sin, they lose the path of wisdom. When they adopt the path of being wrong in their lives, of leading their lives as if they have forgotten the Almighty, then they lose wisdom. And the example is that of a man being lured by a woman. He goes to him and he satiates his desire, he quenches his desire from that woman, but then he never comes back, which of course means that he gives himself to lust and lewdness in such a way that he forgets the Almighty, forgets God, he forgets wisdom which can come from God. So wisdom is something that all of us really should target, and the key to wisdom is this true knowledge of the Almighty, the true knowledge of how He deals with people. For example, if we are aware of the fact, as we just read earlier on, that one of the precepts of this knowledge is that the reason that this world has been created is to try and test you. Now, one of the biggest bothers of ancient minds and modern minds has been that why does evil exist if God is merciful? And this has eluded so many minds. We have seen the Buddha, we have seen so many other people take to the jungle and go into deep meditation and cut themselves off from this world, simply because this connection between a merciful God and an evil world is difficult to establish. So it is wisdom which tells us that there is this connection, and it is wisdom of the Qur'an, wisdom of divine scriptures, which tells us that the reason for this existence of evil is that it has the purpose of trying and testing a person. It is the wisdom of trying and testing the mettle of a person. And instead of complaining to God, instead of being disgruntled at the challenge which faces us, we have to take it head on. And if we think that that evil should not exist, then this is something that we would like in our own mind, because we would like this world to be as if it was a perfect world. Remember, the Almighty has not created this world in the perfect sense. This perfect sense is something which is clearly ascribed, or should be ascribed, to the life hereafter, to paradise, where everything will be perfect. But this world is an amalgam of imperfections. We have problems, we have things going wrong. We find the most noble of people at the bottom of the society. We find extremely virtuous and pious people being really beaten up in the society. They are at the lowest rung of the society, and we find evil ruling the world. So we must not think this world to be a perfect. It's a place of trial and test. This is one thing which has been told to us through these holy scriptures, and this is one thing which really makes us wise. It gives us this wisdom that this purpose of life that we have, or the purpose of creation of this universe, there is some wisdom behind it. And if we don't understand that wisdom, we'll never get satisfied. We'll never be satisfied with how life is proceeding. We'll really take things to our heart. We'll not have the courage to fight. We'll not have the courage to stand up, simply because we would like the result of every good deed to be good and every evil deed to be evil in this world. And we have been told in scriptures that this is not how the Almighty has made this world. He has different plans. So similarly, other knowledge precepts of the Almighty have to be understood as well. This is one of the precepts that we have been told, that if we understand the meaning of life, it will be a lot easier for us to bear the pangs of this life. It will be a lot easier for us to go through the pains of this life. And of course, then we will have the courage to do a lot of good things. There are other precepts as well of knowledge. For example, the fact that how do we relate to the Almighty, how we relate to our fellow human beings. So all of these laws of prudence are set out in divine scriptures. They are also found in our own innate guidance, within our own hearts, in our own intuition. And it's just a question of showing patience and meditating and looking into the scheme of things which surrounds us with the help of the scriptures that are around us. So with these words, I come to an end of this session, and I would like to open your mics now if you have any questions, and of course after that we will have a small discussion or maybe a small debate on a particular topic that I'm just going to spell out in a little while. So I see the mic of Sayyid Abdullah Ali. You raise your hand, so I'm just going to unmute your mic. If you have a question, you are self-muted, sir. Please unmute your mic. You have to unmute your mic yourself. Yes, please go ahead now. Wa alaikum assalam.
This is my first time that I'm participating.
Well, if it's preferred if you can stick to the topic. Otherwise, you can ask a general question as well.
Fellow students who belong to the to another, they claim to be a sect of Islam, and the thing that I used to put in front of them, and something that was that used to convince them, or something that they used to acknowledge was in fact disturbing, was that their founder had greatly supported and spoken in favor of a government that many consider to be, historians or other people who actually think that the government was unjust and they were not supported, and they caused oppression when they were there. However, I came across this hadith now, it's Sahih Muslim 1847, I think, that says the same thing. It actually says that the Prophet said that even if your ruler is unjust and he has the heart of a devil in the body of a man, if he slogs your back, if he tortures you, and even if he snatches away your property, you must still obey him. So this is something very disturbing to me, because it goes against everything that I thought I knew about. Even in the farewell sermon, where the Prophet said that do not oppress and do not be oppressed. So I understand that there is some wisdom behind this, that fighting against such rulers may lead to greater evil, but this is something that is very, very disturbing to me. I do not understand the wisdom behind this.
Okay, so I'll try to explain what this narrative has actually said. And it's actually a delineation of what the Quran has said at some places, and that is that anarchy or lawlessness is something which is clearly something which is worse than disorder. It causes a lot of disruption. So if you understand the spirit of what this narrative says, because this has been mentioned at several places in Hadith literature, if you get the sense of all these narratives by combining them, the what has been said is that basically you have to obey the rule of law, even if the people who rule you are unjust, even if the people who rule you are people who are unworthy of their position. This, of course, does not mean that you are condoning them or you're accepting them as good people. It tells us that we must not break the law. For example, if a ruler is unjust, it does not mean that we should start breaking our traffic laws or other laws which make us citizens of that country. So it's basically targeting anarchy and lawlessness. And it tells us that even if the ruler is someone who is not a good person, who is someone as the Hadith says, even flogs your back, he persecutes us, even then we must not break the law. So it's basically obeying the law of the land in letter and spirit as far as we can. However, if rulers are unjust, of course we have been given certain methodologies through which we should try to remove those rulers from their posts, for example, by trying to democratically dislodge them from their places, by several other ways, which of course if you can ask, I'll describe, because it varies from country to country and from system to system. But the bottom line here is, it's not like obeying something said personally by the ruler. What is being said here is that the law of the land has to be obeyed, come what may, even if the circumstances are such that your rulers are very unjust and very oppressive and they persecute you. So you should not say that, okay, if our rulers are unjust, I'm not going to obey the law. That is something which is of course, it has still allowed in certain exceptional circumstances that we can discuss of. But just to appease your concern, I just have this much to say, that you have to think that this hadith is actually telling us to never leave this rope in which we are tied as citizens to the state. So it's like not disrupting the system of state in spite of the fact that our rulers are bad or unjust. Okay, so do we have another question? I can see some other hands up. So, Mr. Mushtaq Khan, I think you're self-muted. Do you have a question? Because I can see your hand being raised, or was it at the beginning when we just had a chat about the mic? Okay, so it seems that there is no more question. I'd just like to point out one more thing before we'll end this session, and that is that a small input to you regarding self-improvement. Remember, Ramadan especially is a time for self-improvement. It is a time to look into our own selves, to introspect and reevaluate our lives, reevaluate our life routines, and strive to become better individuals. So the best way for self-improvement, dear viewers, is self-accountability. If you'd like to become people who would like to improve your own mistakes and faults, just write them on a piece of paper. The things that you are passing through, the bad habits that you might be having, just write them on a piece of paper in ascending order, which means that the least of them should be at the top, and then the next, and then the next. And start off one by one. And the best way for self-accountability is to target some bad mistake that you have, some bad habit that you have. And this bad habit, of course, is then analyzed. It's like a pattern that you often get in your own lives. You know that there are certain habits that you have developed and you'd like to get rid of, but you're not being able to get rid of. So the first thing is that before going to bed every day, start this process of self-suggestion. It's a psychological process. It's something which really has worked wonders. Even if you are bad into something, even if you are heavily into something and it's very difficult for you to avoid certain things, start this process of self-suggestion every night before going to bed, in which you suggest to yourselves that I'm going to fight this. I'm not going to do this again tomorrow. But even if you do it again tomorrow, and if you do it again and again and again each day, the following days, don't get frustrated. Don't get disappointed. Don't lose heart, because things don't go away in a jiffy. They take time. And it's a question of this self-suggestion, this self-empowerment that you have to undertake time and again. And if you start suggesting yourselves that I'm going to conquer these things, I'm going to do away with these things, and if you do it persistently every day, you'll see that this auto-suggestion process has its effect on one's psyche, one's inner self. And when the time comes for you to go again to that mistake or again to that folly, you actually find your mind, that ring in your mind which tells you to stop. And even if you do it again, still that ring is there. And the more you are auto-suggestive, the stronger that ring will become over a period of time. And one day, inshallah, if you keep on doing it, if you don't give up, you'll find yourselves in a position to really uproot that evil. And remember, things don't go away forever. We are human beings. Even bad habits, they might go away, but they still come back. So we have to think that it's not as much as that bad habit which comes, as much as our attitude after it. If we express remorse, if we feel that guilt, if we come back to the Almighty every time that we go away from Him, it is something which really pleases Him. And remember, if as far as sinning is concerned, it comes naturally to all of us. All of us have this natural inclination towards doing bad things, and equally natural is this inclination to do good things. So this auto-suggestive behavior makes us analyze ourselves, and it tells us that we have to take charge of our own lives. We have to put our house in order ourselves. No one else is going to do that. And the biggest hindrance in this is this suggestion of Satan that you are no good. Every day you make this commitment, and every day you break it. So don't succumb to this. Don't think that if you're doing something again and again, then again this will hamper you. No, this is something which you have to put up with. You have to show that will and determination. It's difficult, of course, when you do the same thing again and again. But if you have this auto-suggestive behavior, and of course you are able to at least do it or maybe conquer it once in a while, that gives you that inspiration that you can do it on more occasions also. So you see, you have to look for small inspirations, small motivations, and they are that when you are able to do it once or twice maybe, then remember that you can do it for more as well, more times as well. It's just a question of expressing your own determination and mustering that courage and strength in your own selves. So remember, self-improvement comes through self-suggestion, through self-accountability. We are always holding other people accountable for what they are doing wrong. We have to forget about other people. We have to make this concerted plan in our lives that let's forget about what other people are doing. Let's concentrate on what we are doing wrong. Because we might not know what the other person is going through and how he might or she might be combating those things in his or her life. But we know what we are from inside. So holding ourselves accountable, holding ourselves in that place in which we'd like to correct ourselves is the right approach, and forgetting about others is, of course, the right way. So self-accountability, self-empowerment, self-actualization, self-motivation, all these things come with time, but they come with this self-suggestive behavior, this auto-suggestive behavior, which has been known to work wonders. And so let's give this a try, if not already. So if we don't have any further questions, I would end this session now, and also remind you that just about 10 days remain of this holy month, and it's the last Ashura as well, the last 10 days, and we have to be even more attentive to the needs of this holy month. And the biggest need, as we know, is that we have to recognize the limits that we must not cross. And this is precisely what taqwa is, and this precisely is the reason for which we fast. Fasting is for the reason that we are inculcated with this value of taqwa. And taqwa means to know our limits, not cross our limits, know our bounds, to remain within bounds. And the best way to do that is to hold ourselves accountable, before ourselves, and try as much as we can not to indulge in those things that we normally do. So with these words, it's thank you very much. Khuda Hafiz, and inshallah we'll meet next week, same day and same time. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين.